What's up guys, we're back in the garage, back to working on the Z, because today we're taking this thing to the next level. Now, unfortunately, I don't mean in terms of competitiveness. I don't have a cool engine swap for this thing yet. It's not getting any more power. Nothing super exciting, but very important. We are adding quite a few safety features to this car because the next event I want to drive requires them all. So let's get to work and I'll talk you through what we're doing. Okay, but before we get too deep into all the fun new safety stuff we have to put on, I need to fix a huge issue with this car, and that is the transmission. If you guys saw the hot pit video, this thing was popping out of gear, it was missing shifts, and it's been giving me problems for a long time, and I kind of just drove around it, but I'm sick of it. Thankfully, a local buddy had a trans sitting around from a parts car he had, so we picked that up. I'm gonna yank the trans out of this thing, we'll get that swapped out, and then we can move on to the equally as important safety stuff. That took so much longer than it should have. The transmission on these things are not the easiest to pull out. It's really just the two bolts way up at the top. I ended up loosening the trans mount on the bottom and jacking the transmission up to try to get more room from the top. So with that, I was able to reach down in here with like a long breaker bar, get it on the bolt and just break it loose. After I cracked them loose from the top, I lowered the transmission about as far as it would go, so tilting the whole drivetrain down. And then I was able to get kind of from the back side, like 4 long extensions together and just whiz them off. But you had to break them loose with a breaker bar. Even using the biggest impact I have, you have to stack so many extensions that it kind of just loses all of its torque. So bit of an annoying process, but all the bolts are out. It's time to drop this transmission so we can get a new one in. As you can see, we've got a decent gap between the trans and the motor, and we've got the thing supported on a jack. It's just time to do some wiggling and drop it out. I put the camera down for a little while. It's been a couple days, but it's time to update you guys. We got the new trans in. I've got a new clutch in. Everything's pretty much buttoned up down there except for one thing, and that is what this video is actually about, is all the new safety features we're adding to the Z, and one of them is underneath the car. Let's climb under there and I will show you what I'm working on. All right, we're under the Z here. You can see we've got our transmission, excuse my dirty shoes, transmission mount, drive shaft, and this is a drive shaft loop. So it's literally a piece of very thick steel that loops around the drive shaft. You can see it goes all the way up there. Now you definitely could bolt it to the chassis depending on what chassis you have, and I could make it work on this, but as you can see the floor just isn't level here. Like if it's in line with this, there's a big gap here, and this is where the holes are at, and this would be in a weird spot in the car if I was going to do a through bolt, and it gets even weirder over there. So I'm just gonna weld it in place. I think that'll work better and look better. But let's get out from under here and I'll explain what this is and why you even need it. So a drive shaft safety loop is exactly what it sounds like. As you saw, it's a big, thick piece of metal that goes all the way around the drive shaft. It gets bolted or welded to the chassis, so it is there in place, and the drive shaft spins in the middle of it. The reason that's there is in case the drive shaft ever explodes, that loop is going to catch the drive shaft from going anywhere else. You don't hear about this too much in drifting, but in like drag racing where they're really loading the car up and launching hard, sometimes drive shafts will break, and if that's not there, the drive shaft can go into the driver's cabin, like straight through the floorboards. I've seen pictures of them like going through and impaling people in the legs, crazy stuff. Again, I don't think it's a big concern in drifting, especially with a stock 350Z drive shaft. It's composite, so if that does ever happen, it's just going to explode. It's not going to be like a sharp piece of aluminum that could pierce through the floorboards. But regardless, it is mandated by the Formula Drift Rulebook, and that's why we're putting it in. Am I taking this car to Formula Drift? No, but as I mentioned, we are gearing up for a pretty serious comp, and because they are an FD licensing competition, you have to have your car up to FD Rulebook. And we're not there yet, but this is one step in the right direction.
All right, it is welded in. Good to go.
Another change we've got coming for the Z to meet safety requirements is going to be changing out my bucket seat. Now, yes, the seat in this thing is my absolute favorite. It is a Bride or Brid Zeta 4 Cusco collab. Love that seat. It fits me amazing, but because it is not a halo seat, it does not meet the safety requirements. So we're going to swap it out with something else. Let me show you what we got. Huge shout out to my buddy Cameron, aka Slide. He hooked it up and let me borrow his Sparco FIA Halo seat. So we're gonna get this thrown in and we'll use this for now. Like I said, big shout out to him because I probably wouldn't be making this competition if it wasn't for him letting me borrow this thing. Seats are expensive. If I bought the seat I wanted, it would have been well over $1,000. And between all the other safety stuff I have to get in order for this car to meet the requirements, it would have just pushed me way out of budget, at least on the time frame I'm on, because this event is only a few weeks away. So let's get the seat swapped out so we can check one more thing off the list.
Little side-by-side comparison.
And it's in. What we lost in style points, we have gained in safety points. I may be borrowing this, but in the future, I'm definitely gonna be in the market for a Halo seat. It's just a matter of which one I want. And this was a great test. I'm really glad Cam let me borrow this thing, because if I had just bought this off the shelf, there's a few little things that don't make it fit perfectly in my car with the cage setup and where I like to sit. Again, I'm pretty tall, so I'm kind of picky with like seating position, and I have to be. But overall, happy with it. It's gonna work. It looks good. It's comfortable, and the seating position's good enough. Let's take a look. It looks good, fits good in there. My only complaint is right here. This extra bar for the cage, I actually rotated the padding. It used to be facing inward. It's now facing towards me. That was just to get the seat a little bit further back. You can see it's like just about touching there. Now that's not really a big deal, but if that wasn't there, or if the seat was a little more narrow, I would be able to recline the seat a bit more, like tilt the whole thing like this, which would keep my feet in the same position, which is perfect, but it would get my hands further away from the steering wheel, which right now my hands are a little closer than I like. But really, I'm just kind of nitpicking at this point. It's definitely gonna work, and it feels pretty comfy. Let me hop in and show you exactly what I'm talking about. It's definitely more awkward to get in now, but once I'm in, so my feet and legs are in the perfect position. I can depress the clutch pedal with still a slight bend in my legs. Happy with that. Now my hands, this isn't bad. I don't mind being a little close to the steering wheel, but because the bolsters here are higher than they were in my bride seat, and I'm now a little closer to the wheel, it puts my elbows pretty close to the seat. And like they don't hit here, but if I was to do some crazy wheel work, they might. Like right there, I'm elbowing the seat. Again, I'm kind of nitpicking. But like I said, I'm really glad I kind of got to test this out and see, is this a good seat for me? Because this is one of the more affordable Halo seats on the market, and it was definitely on my radar. And it still is. I don't think this is a huge deal breaker, but it's something worth considering. Also, while we're in the car, I wanted to point out something super cool. This little guy right here. That is a 3D printed steering wheel holder that mounts where the sun visor mounted. And yes, it has my name in it. Big thanks to Dan, aka Drift Dan on Instagram. Check that out. Love that. All right, I set the camera down for a little while and got some work done, but let me update you on what's going on, because it is an important next step when it comes to upgrading all the safety features on this car. So you guys may remember when we had the fab day and did the tube rear end and all that, Nate was here and he was actually rewiring the internal kill switch. The way I had the two kill switches set up, it was incorrect. It was more of a battery isolator than it was a kill switch, meaning it would just cut power from the battery to the car. It wouldn't actually cut power to everything and actually like turn the car off. So he fixed that. The internal kill switch now works as it should. So if the car is running, you flip the switch, everything shuts off. But we needed an external kill switch, and I wanted to do this the right way, which is kind of the same way the FD guys do it, and it's not running big, heavy, like 0 gauge wire all the way out to the driver's side cowl and putting it on a big switch. They actually just run a little button, you know, and if your car's on fire, you're trapped in it, whatever, track staff can just run up, click a button, and your car is totally dead. Now let me show you what you need to actually make that happen. Now I haven't quite finished the wiring yet, but there's a little black box down here. I already forgot what it's called, but I'll put the name of that thing on the screen. And what that box does is you actually run power through it, meaning I'm gonna have a cable from the battery or power source or the other kill switch. Some main power source is gonna go to that box and then out of it. So basically in that box and then out of that box. And then there's two smaller wires coming out of the top of that box that are going over to a little switch on my driver's side fender or cowl area. And when you click that switch, it acts as an interrupter to the power source, basically stopping it from going through the box, which kills the car. Like I said, it's just a much better way than running two huge like 0 gauge wires from your main power source to the alternator and then back and then to a huge switch out on the cowl. This just makes it way more simple. You have a lot less wires running around, and the 2 wires you do have going out there are pretty small. So here's the switch. Don't mind the second hole, but it's tiny. I'd like to get a little bit bigger of one, but as an example, when you press that, you can see it's stuck depressed. That means the car will be dead. And then press it back, now it's up, and the car will work. I've got to reposition my sticker over there. And you can see here, the wires come from that switch. One goes to a ground, and then one goes to the box. And when you click that switch, it basically completes the grounding circuit, which interrupts the power circuit that goes through the box and kills power to the car. Again, may not seem like much, but it is one more thing checked off the list to get this thing just about FD legal as far as safety requirements go, which is pretty crazy. So I'm gonna wrap up the wiring on this thing, and then we'll fire it up and make sure it works. And then we've got one more pretty big, pretty expensive part showing up, and that will be the last of the safety stuff. Okay, well, can't finish up the wiring because I'm waiting on one special crimping tool that's supposed to show up from Amazon. It was supposed to be here a few hours ago, but in the meantime, a couple other little things off the list. In order to be compliant with the rule book, you need a front and rear tow hook, and they have to be visible, marked, and basically just obvious. So if you need to get towed off track, they're not like digging around under your car looking for something. So the front is dialed, super simple. I just bought a tow strap from RaceQuip and bolted it to the crash bar, like literally just straight through one of the factory bolts. I had to get a bit of a longer one, but works good. Still have to tackle the rear, but let me show you what the front is. You can see a little strap poking out there. Easy as it gets. Can't really see in there, but it's bolted to where the factory crash bar, or in my case, the aftermarket crash bar, right there. So it came with this tab already installed. Obviously, I just adjusted it to the right length, cut it, because it was like super long, and now we're good. For the rear, I have a pretty cool piece for that. So let's get this bumper off, hatch open, and I'll show you exactly what we're gonna do because it's gonna take a little bit of fabricating. Okay, the Amazon truck pulled up literally as I was taking the back of the car apart. So let's finish up the wiring, but I wanna show you what I'm doing here because if you're doing some wiring on your own car, this was an issue I had with the battery relocation and the kill switch and all that. My crimps for the big gauge wire weren't good enough, and it's because I was doing it with like a hammer and just wasn't good. This is the tool you need. It's pretty cheap and it works great. This is a wire crimping tool. Literally just a little lug here, and it's actually spring loaded, so it's holding the connector in place with the wire in it. You give this a couple taps, release the spring tension, and now we've got a real solid crimp on this. Get some heat shrink on that and be good to go. Wiring is complete. Now we turn the key and hope this thing starts. And if it does start, we hope it dies, because hopefully that means the kill switch works. Let's see. Funny enough, I guess I hooked the wires up backwards. If you see, that's it in its dead position when it is like poking out, versus like that. Now the car has power to everything. So, I mean, that works. I don't really think it matters one way or another. I'm just stoked that the system works. That means everything we wired is good. That cool little black box, I still forgot what it was called, but that means it works. We could check that off the list. Okay, so I double checked. The style of switch that is up is actually disengaged, so I didn't wire it backwards, and it all works. That's a win for me. I also took the time while I was under the dash to do a bunch of wire management when we redid the kill switch. I kind of just left everything everywhere. And I also finally got the dash to be like affixed to the car properly. Since we put the cage in this thing, the dash was just kind of like laying in place. And if you look closely at some of the in-car footage, especially at Hot Pit, I think when I was battling Luke or maybe in some of the practice laps, my dash was like falling out of the car. Like it moved a significant amount. So that's fixed. All the wires are nicely routed and tucked up out of the way, and everything works. Stoked on that one. I really don't like wiring, and while this was a really easy job, it's also easy to think, oh man, I don't know what I'm doing, but I do, and it works, and that's sick. Now let's turn our attention to the back of the car. Like I said, we've got to get a tow hook on the back of this thing, and I have a pretty cool part for it. I want to show you guys. All right, rear tow hook is done. This is a super cool laser cut piece from the guys over at Race Club Fabrication. It's literally a weld-on tow point. All I did was clean up the rear beam that we welded in a while ago and welded it right in the middle. I think it looks great. Check that out. Welds aren't great, but they're definitely getting better. I'll take that as a win. I'm still so happy with how the back of this thing turned out. Super cool. So now we've got our front and rear tow hooks done. That is one more thing I can check off the list. And we are that much closer to being FD legal as far as safety stuff is concerned. Now we're on to the next thing on my list. And while I'm still waiting on probably the biggest piece, it hasn't quite shown up in the mail yet. We've got to move our attention to something pretty small, but it's part of the rule book, so it's important here. And that is an SFI or fireproof shift boot. It's kind of funny that you need that, but if you think about it, if there is a fire underneath the car, it can come up through the transmission tunnel where your shifter's at and get into the driver's cabin. So let's take a look and figure out exactly how we're going to install this thing, because it's just a universal part, so there's no like provisions for how to mount it. We're going to have to get a little creative. This is what we're looking at here. SFI rated fireproof shift boot. Kind of just looks like a witch's hat. But this will go right over the shifter. Like I said, we just need to figure out a way to mount it to the car. Now I'm going to do riv nuts in here so I can put some nice hardware and have this basically be bolt-in. But the easiest way to figure out where I'm actually going to drill these, I'm just going to run self-tappers straight through it. That'll give us a hole on the bottom, and then we'll be able to put our riv nut right in there. All right, so we use our self-tappers to get this thing in place. Now I'll pull all of those out and we'll have holes in the right spot. We can drill them out a little bit bigger and put our riv nuts in there. So if you're not familiar with riv nuts, or also called nutserts, this is what it looks like. It's literally just a little insert with a threaded part down there. So I'm basically putting an M6 nut wherever I want. So you can see we drilled out a hole over there and then we inserted it. This is the finished product. And this is the tool that I use. It's really similar to like a rivet gun or anything kind of in the same category. I'll put a link down below to where you can find one. I have used this thing so much. It is such a handy tool. Seriously, if you don't have one, pick one up and you will be amazed at how often you use it. It's so handy just to be like, oh, okay, well, I really want to bolt something right here. Just drill a hole, pop this guy in, and you're good to go. All right, so we've got our nice new hardware in there. You can see I used a pretty big washer to hold everything down flat. Looks pretty good. One more thing checked off the list. The last piece to our safety puzzle is finally here, and that's a fire suppression system. This is something I've been waiting for a while now, and I'm pretty excited to get into it. Hopefully it's not going to be too much work because the Drift League event we're supposed to be driving is in just a few days. But let's open the box and see what we're working with. As a recommendation from a couple friends who went with a Lifeline, there's the part number there. Let's go ahead and open this box and see what's inside. Our nozzles and some T-fittings, and I think this is like some heat shielding or something. And of course, free stickers. Gotta love that. Now this seems pretty straightforward. I'm gonna go with step one being, let's find a good place to mount this bottle, and from there we can start running lines. Man, you do not realize how uneven the floor of your car is until you try to put something flat on it. There was hardly any good spots to mount this. Now, the place I really wanted to mount it was like right in the middle of the like back seat area, but that's actually where the gas tank goes from one side up and over to the other side. And looking at a diagram, if I was to put like riv nuts or basically drilling any hole in there, I think it's a little risky and it would put me too close to the gas tank. One day that may work when this thing has a fuel cell, but as of now with the stock gas tank, out of the question. After that, I played with a bunch of different areas to finally figure out where this bottle was gonna go, and I ended up putting it on the rear firewall that I made a little while back. Come to think of it, I don't even know that I showed you guys the rear firewall, but let me show you the install of where this bottle is gonna hang out. So this is where the passenger seat would normally be, and that is my rear firewall. And as you can see, it's bolted to that. So we used a nut and bolt straight through that firewall for that aluminum bracket, and that's where that guy's gonna hang out. Like I said, if you haven't seen my firewall, I don't think I really talked about it before, but it's just a big piece of sheet metal bent there, and then it goes down to a second piece of sheet metal. I still need to do something about like that little gap there, and still need some fit and finish to do, but overall it's pretty good. So before we run the lines, I want to knock out the cable. Now it's literally a manual cable that when you pull, it squeezes the trigger on the fire extinguisher. Pretty standard way these things operate. And according to the FD Rulebook, if you mount the pull cable to the driver's side A pillar, meaning on the roll cage or on the A pillar of the car, then you don't need a secondary one because both the driver and like a track official can reach that. So my plan is to use a little tab like this, weld it on to the A-pillar bar somewhere like that, and then we'll just run the cable straight through that, tuck it away nicely, and then it'll be attached to the bottle back there. So we got our cable in place. You can see I welded a tab straight to the roll cage. Nice, secure, right in the right spot. Oh no, we're on fire. Pull that, bam. Gotta give a shout out to Steel It. If you guys have never used Steel It before, it's gotta be some of the best stuff when it comes to coating or painting raw steel. I mean, I painted the roll cage when the windshield was out, at least the A-pillar bars. But that was my first time welding through it. So the cool thing about Steel It is it's a durable coating that'll prevent rust and all the normal stuff. But what's not normal about it is you can weld straight through it. So I had to do absolutely no prep to the cage, just held the tab up, welded it on, and it welded perfectly. And as you saw by the last clip, it touched up perfectly. I didn't sand anything. I just cleaned it, let the weld cool down, and then touched it up with the same can. It looks amazing. So thanks to Steel It. One of these days I'll get around to doing the whole interior, but for now we're doing little odds and ends here and there. That's actually what I did on the quarter panels as well. Might as well show you that in case you didn't see it in the last video. All right, let's get back to work. We got most of the lines ran for the fire suppression system, and I figured I'd show you guys how it works. It is super simple. So we've got one line coming off the fire extinguisher tank. So there's one line coming off that. You can see we've got a nozzle pointed at the gas tank area, which is what the FD Rulebook states. From there, it runs along the footwell. I still have to tidy that up. It'll go under the dash, and then I'll have another nozzle pointed in the driver's cabin area. And it tees off, goes up under the dash, out of the firewall up here, which is where it pokes out, tees again, and we've got one routed to a nozzle right here, and the other one is routed to a nozzle right down there. The FD Rulebook states you need one pointed at either the fuel cell or in my case a stock gas tank, one at the driver's cabin but not directly at the driver, and then one in the engine bay. Now, obviously, I did two in the engine bay. I figured one on each side was a lot safer, and that's how most people do it anyways. So I just need to tidy everything up, finalize the location for the one in the driver's cockpit, and then obviously attach the cable, because you saw as I pulled it earlier, it's not actually hooked to anything. And that's just kind of routing it and hooking it up to the little squeeze lever thing on the extinguisher itself. Well, this is me sitting in my car with no seats, no harnesses. This was supposed to be the end of the video where I said we did all the safety stuff and everything is good. But I thought, let me read through that rule book one last time before we wrap it up and get everything loaded up for the weekend. I wanted to double check that my harnesses were the right homologation or whatever you want to call it. And they were. They're FIA something, whatever. They're pretty nice Yashio factory harnesses. But I overlooked the fact that they're 4-point harnesses, and the FD Rulebook states you need a minimum of 5-point harnesses, which means the anti-submersion belt that goes in between your legs. I don't have that, and that's a problem. Took the seats out, playing around with some hardware. I've got harnesses being overnighted, and while it's a bit stressful because I think they're going to show up here Friday, and we have to be at the track Saturday at 7 in the morning for tech inspection, I'm pretty sure that's it. Like I said, I've read the rulebook a lot. I think we've got everything covered. I really hate doing stuff the absolute last minute, and I'm bummed that the harness is what is putting us in that last minute position, but whatever, it could be worse. We've still got a good running car, and like I said, I'm pretty sure everything else is up to par as far as the rules are concerned. But that's a wrap. As far as I know, this thing is up to the FD Rulebook safety standards, at least once those harnesses show up. All I can do at this point is install the harnesses when they get here, and just cross my fingers and hope that everything goes smoothly Saturday. You guys will have to wait for the next video to find out. But yeah, hopefully we do well. This is going to be kind of the most serious event we've done so far. I mean, the safety standards are pretty far above hot pit stuff. I honestly, at first glance, I thought, considering my car was up to hot pit levels, it was good as far as safety stuff's concerned, aside from the fire suppression and some little things that I was taking care of, but not the case. I think we got all our bases covered. I've read the rule book 3 or 4 times. We should be good once that harness gets here. And that's a pretty easy thing to swap out, so I'm not too worried about it. So cross your fingers for me. Thanks as always for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Give it a thumbs up if you did. And I'll catch you in the next one where we're at the track, hopefully passing tech, competing, and doing well. I'll see you guys then.